All right, so I'd like to invite you in the next hour to look at people, talk about people, and discuss people. We are talking about people now. And my assumption is that we are all fairly passionate about permaculture, fairly passionate about the ethics of permaculture, and also, I think it's fair to say that the permaculture movement is quite good with the earth care bit of permaculture ethics. There have been decades of focusing on how to deal with nature, how to deal with natural systems. And also, my assumption is that we are fairly passionate about also the people care and the fair share element of the ethics. But for this hour, I'd like to assume that as a movement, we didn't deal so much about this so far. So the way I see the permaculture movement is that it is also going through an evolution. And coming from more like focusing on the earth care element, we are now focusing more and more on the people care element. But there are lots of questions, and maybe that's something that we can explore a little bit. The things that I bring here today are fairly rough, considering the time that we only have an hour. We are not going to have a chance to go into nuances in this hour, but I'm quite open to discuss them further. And my intention is that we just explore this space a little bit and maybe start a discussion. I think Central Europe is very special, and I'll come back to this in the presentation. So I think there are lots of interesting angles that might be worthwhile for us as permaculturists to explore. So that's a little bit about the context. And there was something else I wanted to say about my background. I started as an environmentalist many years ago, and I'm an agriculture economist by training. Did a lot of agronomy at university, and I started as a young, enthusiastic environmentalist in the 90s. I was involved in the first CSA of the country, very passionate. But then I had my children, and I started to realize that, it was really like, hang on a minute. It's very nice that we are talking about environmental stuff, but it was only mostly accessible for white middle-class people. CSAs put a lot of burden on women, just buying everything raw. So I started to face on my own skin that the way we approached the environmental movement and the things that we were discussing was kind of elitist in a way. And then I started to think about, okay, how do we create a society? Back then I didn't really think about in permaculture terms. It was more like just exploring and, trying to find a language around this. How do we create more fair societies? Or how do we make progressive ideas more accessible? These were the questions that we were discussing a lot back then, and we didn't really find the answers. Fast forward to recent times, I believe strongly that the permaculture language and the permaculture approach has the answer to that, and the movement is now at the stage where we can really go deeper into this, and I think I will have something to say to your question in the previous round about that. Just a little bit of a wider context, and also in Freddy's presentation he was mentioning how do we reach out of our bubbles, and kind of his answer, and I think it's a very good one, is to go into research more and explain permaculture more to the wider farming community based on research. I think that's a very good way to approach this. Another way is to focus on people. How do we look at the society, the bigger society, out of our bubbles, and what are we going to do with all of this? So a little bit of why we are here. One way to look at is that there are lots of communities. Also, there was this question about people having less money. If we look at the wider society, we see lots of questions and lots of issues. Also, I would argue that we also see lots of opportunities that we, as permaculturists in Europe, in Central Europe, we can address and utilize using permaculture design and permaculture approach, not to mention. There is a huge social transition, and we have permaculture, which is lovely to have. Also, there is a growing debate of the polycrisis in the wider society on all kinds of levels, from the individual to like more macro level, and also the nature. So I think there's a good momentum now that people are more like compared to 30 years ago when only the hippie green ones were talking about environmental issues, for example. So in the wider society, I think there's a lot more open space to address these kind of issues in a complex manner, because the society is more open to that. There is another important element probably to mention at the beginning is the aging of Europe. That's kind of the title of my presentation. How do we respond to the demographic reality? And I'm not sure how much it is visible. It speaks about youth deserts. It's from The Guardian. And there's this debate about, if we look, I mean, I think it's 2020. But anyway, they were not part of the European Union by then. But I think it's still relevant to talk about Europe from a demographics perspective, that some, especially in Central Europe or on the periphery, young people are moving out. And there are these so-called youth deserts where young people are leaving the space. That's one thing that I'd like to mention. Also, the other thing is, as we all know, Europe is aging significantly. At the moment in Hungary, 40% of the total population is above 50. Can you imagine this? 40% of the total population in Hungary is now older than 50 years old. And in 20 years, it's going to be 46%, according to the Statistics Office of Hungary. So like half of the population, it's fair to say, well, not really statistically, but almost, older than 50. If we consider, for example, the Hungarian educational system, young people coming into the space, into the social space, are less and less. Education is not so much accessible anymore. We have the care crisis. Just to look at the demographics of Europe, I think it's a huge question mark, and sociologists, politicians are already talking about this, but I don't feel that we have even proper language to describe that. And not just describe the situation, but to describe the potential solutions that we want to offer to ourselves as a society. So this is, I would say, the problem space framework. And also I would like to introduce something that you probably know, maybe you don't. This is a social change model of Deborah Fries. Any of you know that? Okay. This is a social change model. There is a very interesting TED talk, only 13 minutes. I really recommend that. This is one kind of model to social change, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And this is the framework that I'd like to bring in today, just for us to have a common ground. What she says in her model is that living system, the society is a living system, and living systems are not machines. Machines can be fixed, but living systems work differently. They are born, they mature, and they die. And throughout this process, I'm quoting her, somewhere around the peak of this process, there are turbulences, typically, for example, with the educational systems or the healthcare systems, and new solutions start to emerge, cultural emergence, maybe you heard that term. So emerge, just like in nature, social solutions or answers start to emerge. And when there are many of them and they start connecting as a network, they are able to replace the old system when they become strong enough. I really like this model. There are critics of this model, but I think it's usable and imaginable and relatable for me, for sure, because what I feel often is that we talk a lot about the crises, how miserable the life is, and all the problems. But if we imagine this model and we see ourselves, for example, being part of the permaculture movement, focusing maybe that way, the little images, just where you look at. If you look at from that perspective, you see all the troubles. Sometimes I meet people, permaculturists, who are, for my taste, too optimistic. Or this, forced positive thinking, whatever. I personally like to take the position of that figure over there, trying to see the whole thing in a complex manner, and use the permaculture language to address what we see. So I offer this framework for this kind of thinking today. And also I'd like to show you this one. That's just one way to look at things. It may be true, maybe not true. I'm just inviting you for discussion. And maybe we can look at this like the history of the last few decades from a social change perspective. Maybe I can say that I'm old enough. When I started to be active in the green movement or in social movements 30 years ago, I saw a very different landscape. And one of the reasons why I became fairly optimistic just in the last few years is because I see so much change in the different movements compared to when we started, and it was just so much like, we have a saying in Hungary that we are vomiting peas to the wall, which means that it's a heavy kind of process, but it doesn't have any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Back then, that was the experience. Tracy, you probably remember that. We were just talking and everybody thought that we are stupid. And that was a struggle. But I see that in the last, I would say at least 5 years, and before COVID, so I don't think it's the result of COVID. I already saw it happening previously. Like lots of movements started to, develop quickly, or also in the permaculture movement, and that's a little bit to your question. There are loads of people coming to the movement. And not just coming to the movement, but being more interested in doing environmentally sound gardens. We have Facebook groups, not permaculture groups, like 200,000 people, just being more aware of the environmental issues, also like food production, local food production, because of cost purposes, but also health purposes. It's a completely different space to like 20 years ago. So, I would argue that the environmental and green movement reached a lot, and not just the official green movement, for example, in Hungary, but people changed a lot. There's a lot more environmentally conscious thinking and dialogue. There are younger generations now who are more educated around this. Lots of good things are happening. The social and human rights and equality movements, not necessarily in their results, but in their language and in their way of thinking, changed a lot, and I think in a good way. Also, the aspect of social and digital innovation reached so far. When we started doing like social movement kind of activities 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet. So to go out and invite people for an open discussion, that was a different space. So much work, advertising in the local papers. The tools we have to generate social change is amazing, I think, today. The feminist movement also changed a lot. I'm not going into that, but because there are lots of problems there also, but the care-related dialogue is growing in the feminist movement, and I think it's a good thing. There are lots of new mental health narratives in the society. There are lots of more mental health issues, but the way we talk about mental health and how communities can respond to mental health, I think, is changing in a good way. Science achieved a lot. We have lots of new knowledge and also technology, and obviously the permaculture movement changed a lot. And these are just a few that, you know, from the top of my head I invented, kind of. So it's not rocket science. I'm just inviting you to this kind of thinking. And the way I see the permaculture movement, the way I see permaculture as a language and as an approach is that it can serve and act as a language for like social dialogue, but also like even grassroots and policy level approaches and actions. And this is kind of the model, that the way I can imagine how these movements can come together. When we have spaces like this, architects are coming to the space, psychologists are coming to the space, not only farming people. It's a lot more diverse space now, permaculture movement. And if we go back to the permaculture ethics and start to talk about like bigger scale social change, which is more inclusive, more wide in the public, maybe we can now go deeper into like a care-focused, care-based, sustainable and regenerative society. And we are still talking about people. In the PDC, in the Hungarian PDC, these social blocks are still, we call them invisible structures. We understand the earth care element, we understand structures, and when we start talking about the society, we still talk about invisible structures, and this is how we talk about this. I was in Germany, in Austria last week, talking to municipality people, municipality employees, young people in their 30s, and the way they presented what they do is that was what they said, and I was very pleased to hear that, also very happy to hear that what they said to the visitors is that, okay, we understand that we have like housing structures, hard structures, but and that was municipality people talking about this. We are now building social structures, and they have offices for that. They are consciously thinking about human and social structures. They didn't speak about permaculture in that respect, but now, I'm still missing the time when we start talking about this, like these social structures as something that we need to design, we need to build, we have to have infrastructure for that, we need to have people, not just, passionate NGO people on a volunteer basis, but to build these kind of structures. Okay. And this is where we are now in a space where we can start thinking about permaculture as a local and regional development approach and tool. So we are designing and developing social structures with permaculture, permaculture ethics and permaculture design principles, not to mention the flower, which very nicely tackles all sorts of elements of a community. For me, that's a very nice surprise in Hungary that now municipalities are a lot more open to what exactly. They don't speak about permaculture yet, but especially in smaller villages, and especially because of our stupid political situation, and also because of the care crisis, many municipalities, compared to like 20 or 30 years ago, are now starting not to be afraid of their own people. In the past, they didn't really want to work together with NGOs. I'm simplifying it because of time concerns. and it's all debatable, but that's my experience. And we heard that from municipalities in like 20, 30 years ago, that they don't want to work with NGOs because they see them as political threat. Now we hear from many municipalities in Hungary, and Fredi is from one of these villages, actually, if you want to talk about like really living, working examples, where municipalities are now looking at people because they don't have the money to sort out the aging issue, to sort out local social care issues, local food systems. Municipalities now started, not all of them of course, but surprisingly many of them, they started to see the public as people that I want to cooperate with as a municipality or as a mayor. And that's a big deal. It opens up the space. So when Fredi raised in his presentation, like how do we go out with the permaculture design thinking, I see this as a very strong entry point to reach out. Maybe, I mean, for sure we need to use a different kind of language. I will show you an example of that just in a minute. We need to use a more, I don't know, not so academic, not so white middle class language about what we do when we do permaculture. More like language that resonates with people who cannot afford being members of a CSA or cannot afford talking very abstractly about permaculture, but somehow more related to their everyday lives. And I'll show you an example of that. But there are entry points, I would argue, and also because people have less money to go to PDC courses. PDC courses are long and expensive. And so many people are interested in household level food production. So we can do that as permaculturists, talk with people and our communities about this. And then we can also introduce permaculture language step by step. And this is also actually what we do, and I'll show you an example of that. So I think we as the movement now at a space, and also the wider society around us, can be seen in a way, based on this context maybe, where there are now more opportunities to link up with macro level local systems like municipalities or even companies. I didn't bring examples working with companies on that, but I can see good examples of that because the society is more open to these kind of approaches, and there are younger people in decision-making seats who grew up with this language, with this kind of narrative, and who really mean that they want to build a better society compared to like the 70s or 80s or 90s of my generation. And I'd like to show you one example, just one example of how this kind of approach is addressed in the very poor region of Hungary. This is an example of Jánoshida. And I think the example itself is interesting. But as we are permaculturists now, I'd like to draw your attention or call your attention to the patterns of this, because I think the pattern elements are the ones that are interesting in a sense of like how it can be multiplied in different spaces. Okay. There is this little village, Jánoshida it's called. You can place it on the map over there and over here. This is a very poor region. Young people are leaving. It's a typical youth desert, lots of social issues, lots of mental health issues. It's not an easy space. And now there is this approach where, and it was actually initiated by the municipality. I will explain in detail how this whole thing came about. But the concept is that the mayor of the municipality, who's been the mayor since 98, so almost 30 years, a very well respected person who wants good for his village. He is about 55, middle-aged person. 2 parents died of dementia. He has a lot of knowledge of what's going on a social space as well, also personally. And they do very proper elderly care. Typically in villages in Hungary, if there is a long-lasting mayor in a small village, they know that the population is aging, and they know that they have to do something about that. And they probably do something about that if they want to be re-elected. So there's this very strong knowledge and motivation from like local municipalities to do something about this. So they developed a very serious elderly care system in the village, even though it's legally not binding for villages who have less than 3,000 inhabitants. Can you imagine what a burden it is for a small village because they don't get state funding? They struggle a lot, but they take it seriously. So they have this long history of social care. And the good thing with Jánoshida is they have super rich soil, super good soil, and they have water. So from a natural and environmental point of view, the space supports farming. The soil is amazing, actually. And they also have hot water, like 56 degrees water coming from the ground. So that's the space that we are talking about. And yeah, I'll come back to this. This is the webpage of this project, and I put this here so that you see that the vision and I don't know, the motto is something like that we want to build a caring, sustainable, elderly-friendly, organic and regenerative future. Simply put the words together, but I think it tells about the aim. I think I mentioned most of that side, like small villages in Hungary. There are, of course, rich villages and there are rich regions. It's not true for all the villages, but for many of the villages, it's quite typical that young people are leaving. There are these youth deserts. There is this aging population. Super rich, quite often super rich in natural and ecological resources. Properties are cheap, which is very important from the point of view of the housing crisis young people face. But there is also a lack of active aging and healthcare and elderly care infrastructure, and lack of employment, and no complex rural development vision. So imagine a space where there are lots of resources, but typically missing a vision which responds to the current economic and demographic realities. And we are talking about Central Europe now, and also we are talking about a European way of thinking, where the western part of Europe is struggling so much with the elderly care, also with the housing, lots of issues. So if we imagine the space where we look at Europe, the European Union, as a big permaculture garden, so to say, from a social point of view, all of a sudden maybe we can we will start seeing opportunities coming from perhaps cheap properties, good natural and ecological resources, also the lack of infrastructure with social and elderly care, and the care crisis in general, mental health crisis also. I hope that by now you start seeing this map of social space in which a permaculture design approach can offer answer to like revitalization of rural spaces. Is that true? Is my assumption right on that? Does it make sense so far? So I will just show you a couple of examples, a couple of pictures of this, and maybe we can discuss it, what you think about this whole thing. I already mentioned these. The good thing about Jánoshida is not all the things I already mentioned, but also that it's not really in the middle of nowhere. So it's like an hour drive from Budapest, an hour drive from the airport. It's always a debate in the permaculture movement, and also in the spaces in Hungary where young people want to move out to spaces. How far do I want to move? Do I really want to move out completely off the grid, or do I want to find some like local hidden infrastructure such as a shop or a DIY store, something that I need probably if I don't want to store everything in my farm or something. Anyway, that's an ongoing debate. And the way this whole thing started with János Hida is the key was this guy, Péter Sziráky, who is an ex-paramedic and an elderly carer himself. He's from the village, and I also do elderly care in the UK, and this is how we met. And we had this policy paper. It's not a policy paper, it's a blog post basically. It's just a short article in which all of the things that I summarize now so far, we wrote it as a blog post kind of like, let's create a new vision for Hungary. That was the article. But you know, it's not scientific, it's just a blog post. And he read it and he contacted me 2020. Lockdown. I remember the first phone call in the lockdown. I was running around in the flat and we were discussing. He was saying that, okay, we do these kind of things already. Let's do things together. And I think as a pattern, it's very important that this is something that the village initiated. We have this problem sometimes in Hungary that like city people move out to a village and they want to define the space. And we are the clever people, we will tell you how to live. That's kind of the vibe. And the village people say that, okay, we don't want all of that. So the pattern here, I think that's something that is good to address, is that the way I summarize it for myself is that always start from local needs, right? Grow it from what's there in the space. So this is how we started. I think I'll skip this one. So what we do basically is, as it was mentioned on the website, we want to create a resilient, regenerative, elderly-friendly, because of the aging population space, which is attractive to young people, and then we can build the whole region together. It's not only a village thing anymore. Now other villages are joining, other municipalities are joining, because a region can sustain itself, you know, not one family, not one community, not even one village probably, but a region. This is how we think about this. So that's a regional development thing. And because of the diversity, and now I'm talking about permaculture design approach, exactly what the design principles say. We need to deal with the diversity of people. There are really low educated people. They're very highly educated people. They speak totally different language. They have a very different economic situation. How do we bring the whole thing together? How do we get people on board? How can we go through a process in which people get on board and see their space, be it maybe a small business owner who is offering like a massage, as active aging kind of service. We look at the whole space where everybody matters, and it's not just a nice slogan, because people are leaving and we don't have people anymore. It's even hard to find people who are willing to work. We need all the people, so we need to have structures which is open to the people. You understand? That's a long process. There's a lot of education involved, there is a lot of common dialogue involved, there is a lot of visioning together involved. I show you some pictures. The process is very similar as it feels to like developing a permaculture garden from scratch. We see the space, we don't have much, we start planting, then there are the interactions, okay, it doesn't work. Exactly the same approach as we deal with earth care, but it's people care, not to mention the fair share element. Financing, it's an interesting question. I'm not going into that, but maybe you will have questions about that, and then I'll come back to it, because I want to show you some pictures of how it's done on the ground. So we started 5 years ago, and the process was very similar to a permaculture design, garden design in some ways. We sat down together with the mayor, with the social service providers, like key people of the village. A lot of design thinking, a lot of discussion. They were explaining us, when I didn't even know where Jánoshida was, so I had to Google where the village was when I started talking with Peter at the beginning. So we really had to learn from each other, like, what do you have in your head? What do you have in your space? And then we learned that they have so much potential from a natural point of view, from a nature resource point of view, and also from a people's point of view. So first of all, we formed this core community of, core community, mayor involved, Peter involved, social service providers, those who are actually key people in the village, and also people from our organization, which is not MAPER, it's the other one, the Conscious Aging Foundation. I forgot to mention that I'm wearing 2 hats. Lot of design, and then we started to reach out. Ildiko, she's Ildiko down there, over there. She's head of the social care provider system of the village. She's very active. She started to learn about permaculture. I'll show you another picture. Béla Bai, who the Hungarians know very well, and also Freddy mentioned him, came and had the permaculture training. These are pictures from a community design session. You can see like very old people and very young people from the village. We all came together. We were modeling, talking. What do you want with your village? I always say this. Young kids, they said that they all want dino parks. So we have to integrate a dino park, actually 2, into the village, because that's what young people want. I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see it, but dino parks are essential. Now the question, and actually again it's a pattern. How do we integrate this? A dino park, if I think about this from a permaculture perspective, what does it even mean? Plastic dinos? Or how do we do this to make it environmentally sound? But it can be fun, it can be a joint creation with artists involved. All of a sudden the space opens up, and there is a lot of space for being playful, being artistic, and also design together. We built this truck tire pond together with the local people. Again, it was something that we created together, but we discussed a lot, and it's in the garden of the elderly care home. So again, this is an element where local people came because they want to come to these community events. Okay, what do we do now? Let's do a truck tire little pond. And we talked about permaculture. Now people started mulching. The first time when, I'll show you the next one. He's Béla Bai, and he came to the village. And we had the old ladies up there. They know farming from the old days, and they were very suspicious about mulching. And I'm still doing the weeding. I'm not so interested in mulching. But then Béla said that, okay, that's also a tool where you don't have to lean down so much. It's good for your back. Oh, okay. 3 months ago, she came, that lady, the one at the back. Okay, I started mulching, and okay, that makes sense. It's better for my back. And again, the pattern in this, other than it's just being a nice story, is that it's a slow process, slow and small solutions implemented, lots of dialogue. We are developing social structures. There is dialogue. We listen. Okay, if you say that you want to do the, hogy van a kapálás angolul? If you want to do the hoeing, no problem. I'm not going to do the hoeing because I want to protect my back. and then the discussion starts. You understand the pattern? This is the mayor and his wife. Those people, some might recognize Melinda there. Also, the pattern here is that for this permaculture training event, we invited people also who are not from the village, but other people who might be interested in buying properties in the village because they want to move there, or they want their parents to have proper care there. So they are interested in the space from an elderly care and active aging perspective. And then we did this joint training together. Again, we come together, we looked at the local historic church, people wanting to move in and local people again. So we try to tackle this problem of the newcomers and the aboriginals, and there's always this tension that way. Again, this is permaculture design, okay? Also, young people are involved in the design process. These are some pictures about that. We built that one together, also newcomers and villagers, which is, it's a sensory thing for example, people living with dementia. This is a therapeutic tool that we did together where you can walk on different kind of surfaces, and it was fun anyway to do it. I want to show you this. Also, there is a 17-hectare piece of land which is part of the village, and it's owned by the municipality, and we are designing it. It's not how it's going to look like, it's just something for us to have. It was done voluntarily by an architect who is not so much into elderly care. But anyway, the idea here is that we're developing the village with new buildings, co-housing, elderly care system, active aging infrastructure where we want to invite people or welcome people, aging people, young people, all permaculture based, to revitalize the village that way. And I think that's that. I'm going to skip. Well, maybe just one sentence referring back to the original title of the presentation, that again, if you look at this map of Europe, where people are aging, villages are losing young people often, but also there is this really good spaces, good natural resources. One way to look at the space, regions with the permaculture design approach can be like that. And I think it's a good example, and hope to have many more. We work together with other municipalities as well. I know from Kóspallak, for example, where Freddy is from, and some other villages, that they are already thinking about that, aging Europe and how we can maintain our regions. And if we can introduce permaculture design thinking into the space, then I believe, and I see it working, it's a very effective tool to work together with the other players, actors of regions. So that's that basically. We'll see how far we can go. Also, we are very motivated because we are getting older. So one big question mark for us is how are we going to be and live if we survive that far in 20 years' time, when there are going to be less people, less young people. So it's also it's a good motivation for us to put energy into this because it's for our own future. So please, if you have any comments, similar experiences, I don't know, points where you can relate based on your experience or your work, please share.
Hello, my name is Lukáš, and thank you for all the information shared. It resonates very much with me. I've been interested mainly in regeneration and regenerative society for the past 5 years. And I've recently moved to a really small village here in, not here, in Czechia. Okay. And I'm actually very much inspired by all the steps that you've taken with the ex-municipality member Peter from the village. So I just want to share the gratitude, share that I'm inspired, and I'm thinking about what's the first step for me personally, because I've moved back into the village where people know me as a kid, and I'm coming back. And also I've already started preparing a workshop with something called local action group, místní akční skupina, to just map what people would like to change in the place where they live. So I know that this is going to happen, but right now my task is to come up with the right questions, how to ask the people or how to involve them in the workshop or in the mapping. So maybe I'm interested in this, like what kind of approach would you recommend to just ask the right question so that we collectively think about how to make the place better. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Do you know the key role play? I mean, what's the size of the village?
Very small. It's 150.
150.
Yeah.
Are there young people?
Not many.
Not many. Like 5, 10, 20?
Like 15 people up to age of 18.
18.
And I think there's like 20... 40 younger parents, like between 30 and 40.
Oh, that's good.
But then there is this gap of like 40 to 60, and then there's a lot of elderly
old people.
Yeah.
And what is the municipality? Are they friendly? Are they open? Are they willing to cooperate with you?
They're very progressive. We have a young mayor. He was the mayor since his age of 18.
Okay.
He's actually my age.
That's fantastic. Okay.
And he is a friend, and he started doing the groundwork really early. So there's a lot to build on. He's already activated the community in a way just by creating 2 events per year where people can meet, have fun with music and drink beer. But that's the first step, and I just want to build on that and to go deeper in the community building.
Yeah, that you already answered. That would be my next question. What are the already existing social structures like these 2 events and whatever kind of already existing structures you have? I think that's exactly where to start from. And I think what I hear from this little thing is that you are already in a very good position. For example, this tire. I don't know if there is an elderly care, kind of like a daycare system or something. So I always suggest to use slow and small solutions, like build on the already existing, I don't know, these 2 events, have a little something there, and then start talking about permaculture, and just start slow. Do something that you can imagine people would come, cook together maybe. I have a problem with cooking because it's so obvious. I would prefer something like building a truck tire, because it's like, okay, we know how to cook. We have cooking events already. Probably they cook something for these events, to go a bit beyond their comfort zone and raise awareness, and then start talking, and then see do community design, and just find 2-3 people with whom you can start talking, and then create it together. Just use, I mean, I know it's too simple, but just use the permaculture design thinking. And then it will grow out like this. Because people will have, like for example, this truck tire building, to do this, it was an idea from the village. Because they saw websites, and Ildiko, who is the elderly care, she's very open, so we could start talking about permaculture. She's very interested, she wants to learn, and then she decided, okay, we could do, that was her idea, you know, and just go with the ideas of the locals. That requires a lot of reactive kind of work. So, for example, quite often we can't plan our time scale according to what we need, because we are reflecting on what the locals' idea is. So we go with that, and then we always add some extra. I forgot to bring a picture now. We just had a camp last week, an intergenerational camp, which was a nightmare for the organizers because kids were there and also the elderly were there, and that was chaos. But we did permaculture with the kids and with the elders, and we were together looking at worms, and we have some pictures like the old people and the young people looking at worms. This is a village, and we were surprised how little they know about like ecological things. That was a very eye-opening, actually, how little villagers know about, like school kids, about nature and the environment compared to what we were studying when we were in school. So regarding education around environmental, in a do things together way, it typically works very well with young people. And I don't know, build it around that. Just go step by step, be very conscious and listen very well and just react to what you hear from the people and just go slow if you are not in a rush.
Okay.
Don't make it your money-making project at the beginning.
It's not.
Also, another approach is which I see often that people, and I failed on that. I got very severe burned out because of that, and it was bad permaculture design back in the time. I put too much energy because I was hoping to get results too soon. And the results come slower, especially at the beginning. So if you can use your energy wisely and don't overdo yourself, then you can last longer.
That's wise. Thank you. Anyone else wants to ask?
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to say that I loved how you said we can think of all of Europe as like a garden and we're doing a permaculture design for that. And some places are thriving and other places need more fertility. And that really resonated with me in our context in Australia and in the intentional community that we live in. It's a very powerful way of seeing things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also to that, our experience of trying to do permaculture design in a small community, about the same size as that village, but we live in an even smaller community within that of about 40 people. Even that is, has challenges when you come in as a new person with all this energy and you're like, yes, let's all do a permaculture design. And some people are interested and other people are like, wait, what are you talking about? We've been here for 20 years and what are you coming in to just tell us what to do? So that social element of design or observation more than anything, it's not about trying to design something, it's more about getting that feedback for even like a year or more. In the designer's manual he talks about observing for 1 year, and we learnt sometimes the hard way that was a good idea, because we have so much enthusiasm, and we've been there 4 years now and still things take time and you have to have infinite patience, but it does progress, and the more people you can get on board, the better it is and the more fulfilling it is as well. So thank you.
Totally agree. Shall I say at this point that actually what the art that you do, we use your permaculture design, the formidable vegetables, as teaching material when we work with young people because they love it.
I just want to thank you as well, because I think you did something for me which I was maybe missing a little bit, which is like, from what I see of people here, there's loads of really creative, kindly thinking people. And I think sometimes we're stuck in a language which isn't accessible to many people. And I just want to give an example from my own district, where recently there was an opportunity, funded opportunity, to take part in a permaculture project. And it was advertised as, would you like to have weaking beds, high weaking beds in a permaculture design? And this was a poster put up in a local district in Budapest. And I looked at it and I thought, weaking beds. You know, first of all, it was actually an English word, vikingagyok, the Viking beds.
Yeah, Vikingagyok.
Permaculture,
Okay.
And
you
high
lost
beds.
half of the society.
And
yeah.
like there was like, so who were we trying to talk to? We were talking to like 0.5% of the population,
Yeah.
you know. And so like what you did here for me was you turned this into language which was accessible and also language which was hopeful and integrative. So putting people back into permaculture, you know, in a way that says, if we work like this, then we create a society where, you know, we're valued. And I think we start to pull at the really gut essential needs that people have in a time when there's so much insecurity.
Yeah.
So, like, in a sense, this is it's not a lifeboat. Maybe it's I don't know, maybe a lifeboat project, but it's definitely really needed. And I really think this is a really nice direction. So thank you.
I'm very glad that you reiterate again the language. I think creating the proper language, and I'm self-reflecting now as a permaculturist, I think that's the way ahead, really. If we want to reach out and not to stay in our bubbles, I think it's super important. Otherwise, we just remain a bubble and capitalism just runs and we just remain a bubble.
Yeah, and capitalism has a great story.
Yeah.
You know, who wouldn't
Yeah.
want to have more, live
Yeah.
better, be happier? Like, but can we say that,
Yeah.
you know, in permaculture? So, yeah, a narrative, language and narrative that works.
And also kindness. I think kindness, again, is not just the word. It's a core of a new society. Just to elaborate on kindness. How do we create kind structures? It's not naive. I think it's essential. And not to talk about it naively, but like pragmatically. How do we do this? And then permaculture design comes in.
Radical kindness.
Radical
Radical kindness.
Yes. Yeah.